Well, this is a great super chat to follow up. I want to get your thoughts on some of these activist investors when it comes to cultural versus financial, if you want to chime in on this. This from Marcus Squintus for $5. Been very busy this week and still catching up. Is this new Disney activist investor supposed to be the anti-Peltz? Just curious. My thoughts is that effectively, yes, he more or less is.
Yes.
There's some nuance to this that I discussed on Pro's live show Thursday. Peltz obviously is more, in my opinion, ideologically minded. Get Disney back, get Disney out of politics, return them to fiscal discipline and making basic, simple family entertainment that returns, in effect, the highest ROI possible. This new guy out there is more of the San Francisco, Marin County, Orange County, California lib. I'm, living in the same neighborhood as Bob Iger kind of thing. Just cool California dude. This is where we are. Your experience, corporate law over the years, when you see these kind of things come up, activist investors, silent partners that want to invest and come in and shake things up. What do you think about what's going on here with Disney with these two guys?
Well, it is a fascinating development. The idea that somebody would not only intervene from the left, but would intervene from the left with money, with serious money. And you got to give him credit if he's really willing to put his money where his mouth is. But if certainly if this is part of the dance that precedes a proxy fight, I don't understand what his case is going to be. We should continue trashing business fundamentals because woke. I mean, what is he adding that BlackRock isn't already? Like, I don't even understand the tactic here. What is he adding to this that isn't already there with the substantial left-wing investor and as you guys were putting it before, the institutional support for the woke agenda? What am I missing here?
I think, Ron, at the end of the day, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, with the Walt Disney Company being a media conglomerate, which is very different than most other major Wall Street companies that are in the investment zeitgeist, right? And that is that the attention factor here is much, much brighter. When you have a guy like Nelson Peltz out there who is, and as we've talked about before, Nelson Peltz is not only a Donald Trump supporter, he's a Donald Trump campaign finance bundler. He is a massive organizer for tens of millions of dollars for the Trump campaign. He lives just down the street in West Palm Beach from Trump in Mar-a-Lago. So does Ike Perlmutter.
And where does this man with the new activist investment firm come? Where does he live, Valiant?
He lives in San Francisco, and he's got another house in Los Angeles.
Where's that house, Valiant?
In Brentwood, right down the road from Mr. Iger.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. We have.
Can I give you guys my idea on why I think this is happening? Ron, I think what's going on here is, I think there was an activist investor who was making demands of Iger, and I think, capital letters think, that Iger needed to find another activist investor to hop in and have an activist investor that he can claim he's listening to. Folks, we've got multiple activist investors here at the Walt Disney Company. We're listening to all of them. Look at these changes that we're making for ValueAct.
Just like they did before with Third Point. Remember the first time Nelson Peltz came around in that same year, you had Third Point out there coming in, and Third Point wanted a board seat. They gave Third Point a board seat. And again, it was to be able to say, well, they come in and we put them on the board just because we didn't want to go with Trian's ideas and Nelson Peltz's ideas. We still listen to our third-party activist investors that actually build the clout. This is another.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, this is another. Let's brush Peltz and Ike Perlmutter under the rug, because I mean, I don't know if you saw this, Ron. I posted this a couple of weeks ago, but I mean, Donald Trump down in Hialeah, Florida, just a few weeks ago. In fact, the night of, just a couple hours after the November 8th Disney earnings call, Donald Trump gets out there in Hialeah, Florida, and he's like, one of the great businessmen, he used to own Marvel, sold it to Disney for $4 billion. Ike Perlmutter sitting right over there, right next to me. He doesn't like Disney. Disney's gone woke, and he's not a fan. And I'm like, that right there is why Disney and Bob Iger and that whole crew out there in California absolutely cannot flipping stand Nelson Peltz and Ike Perlmutter. That's why Kevin Feige and Victoria Alonso pushed Perlmutter out the door in 2016. That's why Bob Iger earlier this year used this guise of cost cutting to say, well, we didn't need Iger's position anymore as chairman of nothing after we cut his nuggets off 5 years ago. Gave everything to Kevin Feige, who has now built Marvel Phases 4 and 5. Look how successful Kevin Feige has been with that, guys. So that's basically what happened.
So if that's the game, right? I mean, in order to play that game, you still need. I mean, presumably he's spending his own money. He's still putting his own money on the line in order to buy this position.
Nelson and Ike, yes.
By the way,
yeah.
The world that we're living in now is one in which there are people who are so freaking wealthy that they can. I mean, look, you have on the extremes of someone who was willing to spend more money than conceivable to make a social point in Elon Musk. That's, but
look at the crap he's getting this week.
Right?
Again.
Believe me, I'm looking very closely at it. So if this guy's willing to spend his money to be this sort of left-wing stalking horse, I guess, that might be the good metaphor.
I like
it's
an
astonishing thing, and it's something that that Peltz obviously has to be aware of as always. First of all, as you point out, it's a tactic that was used before, and secondly, if it comes down to a proxy fight, it's still going to be a matter of the money, and I don't know if merely saying we listen to a wide range of investor voices, and here's this guy, this guy's my bitch. I mean, first of all, for Iger, that's really putting a great deal of faith in that investor being absolutely loyal. And why would a guy with that kind of money be prepared? How much money has this guy put into this? Well, like, what's his stake at this point? Do you guys know?
Peltz is at $2 billion, right?
Okay, so collectively, Ron, what we can infer from some reporting is that Trian Management, which is Peltz's private management fund for clients, the trust, let's call it the mutual fund, the trust that's holding the client assets, has somewhere to the tune of about, we think, right at $1 billion worth of Disney stock, at least insofar as when Disney stock was worth about $80 a share. It's obviously climbed in the last couple of weeks due to a number of factors. We'll talk about that here momentarily. Ike Perlmutter did not give his shares to Peltz in that regard. What he did was he gifted him his Proxy. And thank you. My wonderful daughter is bringing me some more coffee right now. She is amazing. No, you can go put it back on the coffee pot. Thank you, boo.
I hear great things.
Great kid.
Things about
Yeah. We went out. She went out for one of her first drives. She got her learner's permit a few weeks ago, so we're doing that. I didn't die yesterday. I was worried about that. But she's telling me to shut up in the background.
But that's
so anyway,
good dad. I would not have anything to do with the training of any of my children as drivers. I paid people for that. I wanted to maintain my relationship with them, but you are a real loving dad.
Well, you still have to. She had driver's ed. The law says you have to do driver's ed, but you've got to have the permit for 6 months here in Louisiana. before you
Sure.
get the driver's license. So anyway, but back to this is what we do know is that Ike Perlmutter, we never knew until recently how many shares of Walt Disney stock or what his value of Walt Disney stock was since the acquisition in 2009, meaning when Disney bought Marvel from him. We knew even back then that a significant portion of that purchase, which is customary in these kind of deals, to where there was a large portion of Disney company stock that went with the cash to satiate the $4 billion buy.
Right.
Now, Nelson Peltz could have, Ike Perlmutter could have slowly divested of these shares over time. And he probably did divest of some of it over the years to reap the cash, pay the taxes, so on and so forth. I was surprised that when Perlmutter threw in with Peltz, he still had $1.5 billion worth of Disney.
Oh,
So
the proxy power gives Peltz $2.5 billion.
Yes. So he didn't give Peltz the shares. He turned over his proxies for those roughly $1 billion worth of shares to Nelson, who has been a longtime friend of his. Again, both of them from West Palm Beach, just like Trump, or at least live there.
So you guys understand, you two understand, but the listeners to understand what it means. I don't want to in any way condescend, but in case anyone doesn't get it, proxy means just as we use it in everyday speech. He has what Perlmutter did was give Peltz. By the way, it sounds like we have a couple of wealthy, powerful Jews here who are not left-wingers. I just want the internet to be aware of that.
That might become more common in the last few weeks, I guess.
Yes, it will.
So by giving him his proxy, he says, I'm maintaining equitable ownership. These are my stocks for all purposes, all economic purposes, but I'm going to allow you to vote my stock and to use it for purposes of, and again, there can be proxy rules that depend on the class of stock, but as a general principle, you can vote my stock the way you want to vote my stock for purposes of a tender offer, of whatever stockholder rights stockholders may have. So that's what we're talking about here, and that makes perfect sense. So that means that I think, Pearl, that your understanding was that Nelson is good for about $2 billion. If that's true, and assuming that there's no major move, it would be hard to understand how they could give a seat to Nelson, who has a 25% smaller stake than Peltz when counting the proxy. Not hard to understand, but it would be a little bit of a hard sell.
Yeah, and that's the idea right now, right? Is that it doesn't take $10 billion worth of holdings in Disney to have an impact. You can have an impact with $1 billion. And I reminded folks.
That's been my experience. Yeah. When I've been in my $1 billion, I found that I was able to get things done. I sold out, of course, when the stock was high.
If you ever feel the need to break a piece off of that, give me a call. No, but the point being is that look at the noise that Nelson Peltz made a year ago with roughly $1 billion worth just at Trian. He still got that $1 billion worth of Trian. He made a ton of noise a year ago with that $1 billion. And remember, the Walt Disney Company, before it just shot up in the last couple of weeks, had about $160 billion worth of market cap. So now it's getting closer to 200 with the recent increase in price that has largely been influenced by the broader market. The last few weeks, a lot of things have ramped back up. The Dow, the S&P, the Russell especially, and that has been based a lot around the fact that the Fed is signaling that we're going to rock back on interest rates here coming up. It's Christian Corriero for 5. What are the odds that both groups in the Disney proxy war get seats on the board? Also, which group has acquired the most stock, if that matters? Nelson Peltz has the highest amount of proxy between the two, or the higher amount of proxy between the two.
About double, right?
$3 billion. Yeah, about double. Almost triple now, maybe. $3 billion close to worth of Disney shares with the recent increases in the stock price.
You think Eisner or George Lucas are going to break towards one side or the other, or you think they just want to be neutral on this, completely out of it?
Well, I'd be very surprised if an Eisner or Lucas are not voting their shares. Now, will they publicly join? That's a different question, Pro. If you're asking if they're going to publicly join in with Nelson Peltz, my guess would be probably not. But would they vote their shares for Nelson when the annual stockholder meeting comes up in a few months? I think that's very possible.
Or would they ding Bob Iger in the press just enough to let him know, hey, straighten up the act or else we could go over? That's what I've been waiting for, because stuff like this Wish movie coming out, I mean, this is just embarrassing what we're hearing about. It's just embarrassing.
A lot of it's going to
embarrass them.
Yeah, a lot of it's going to depend on who actually has control of Eisner's shares or who has control of Lucas's. And by that, what I mean is usually these guys, okay, if they haven't, and we don't know how many shares of Disney.
Just admit
Lucas
it's you. Owns. We all know it.
I wish. We don't know how many people, we don't know how many shares that Lucas and Eisner would theoretically still have. They could have divested from all of their shares years ago, like slowly over time, right? They could still have.
I don't think Lucas has, given the fact that he made his white slavers comment and then he basically went silent after that. I think he still probably had the shares.
I think he still has some. I think they both still have some. I don't know how many they've sold versus retained, right?
Right.
But my point is that a lot of times what those guys will do over time, especially when you're in that financial position, we're talking about people that are worth billions of dollars. They're going to whittle down their estate, especially when you're the age of a George Lucas and might not be in the best of health, right? A lot of his assets have probably been transferred to trusts and everything that he no longer controls. So effectively, I mean, it may not even be in Lucas's hands anymore. It may be in the hands of his daughter. It may be in the hands of another family trustee or an attorney or an accountant that he has who he's named as trustee that may now have possession. That trust would have possession of those shares. So it may not be a direct issue of, well, George can vote it. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of possibilities out there, but it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how this plays out. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.